How many people want to testify on 872? How about 757? And 1247? And finally, 789. Okay, good. That's not too bad. We might be able to get through all these. The first bill we'll do today, first of all, I think we'll just start acting as a subcommittee until we get a quorum. And once we get a quorum here, I'll probably pause for a moment to go to executive session. I have two bills I want to vote out today. But first up, we'll start. And first we'll hear Senate Bill 872. Carla Eslinger, I'm sorry, Senator Eslinger, please proceed when you're ready.
Yes, it is Senator Carla Eslinger. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and for the record, Senator Carla Eslinger, representing the 33rd Senatorial District. While I know this committee has heard it 1,000 times, Senate Bill 872 truly is a simple bill. Truly is. That should be non-controversial. You know, last year the Senate unanimously passed Senate Bill 25, sponsored by Senator Huff, that allowed for a tax exemption of any federal grant money received by a taxpayer for the purpose of providing or expanding access to broadband to areas of the state that lacked reliable access. Senate Bill 872 is language that has been worked on by the Department of Revenue and stakeholder groups to clarify that the tax exemptions should apply to federal, state, and local grant money. That is only for tax years beginning after January 1, 22, and a technical change in wording that has been worked on by the Department of Revenue and other stakeholder groups. As many of you know, I represent the Ozarks. And while we might be the prettiest part of the state, with our rolling hills and valleys, you'd be hard-pressed to find any sort of internet connection. This legislation is critical in helping provide clarity to what we as the Senate passed last year and to continue to help expand broadband across our state. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be willing to answer any questions and allow the expert witnesses here to expound on this issue.
Thank you, Senator. What happened last year to the bill?
I don't remember, actually. But
last year's kind of a
it just went sour.
black hole to me, too.
We had a lot of good stuff ready to go. And
you can give that answer to almost everything that we do around here. It just went away. Thank you. Any questions for the Senator? Seeing none. How many people want to speak in favor? How many opposed? Okay. First person coming up, please be in favor. Please bring a witness form and tell us who you are and start when you're ready.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Bill Gamble with the Missouri Broadband Providers. We're small broadband providers and telecommunications companies in some of the most sparsely populated, low-density population places in the state. What you asked what happened last year, the bill passed last year, but this brings into some clarification that the Department of Revenue wanted, which explicitly says for broadband grants, and then also it clarifies that it covers state, local, and federal, because we had those contributions into the grants, so it clarifies that. It also has an effective date, which captures some of these grants that were distributed prior to August 28th of this past year when the bill went into effect. So it's clarification, it's important, and because of work in the tax law, we had to make sure the clarification in the statute that in the federal tax law that these grants are exempt.
So it passed last year, just not the clarification and not the whole gamut.
We had the clarification over on the other side, and then just just didn't make it back over here.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Bill. Next in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tracy King here representing AT&T, and we'd like to go on record in support of Senate Bill 872. Just to clarify a little bit more on what Bill said, so we had Senator Huff file the what we called placeholder language, right? While we still worked with the Department of Revenue and all the stakeholder groups. That language was in his original bill, was then fixed, right? When it went over to the House, and then it got on the House floor. It was the last week of session, and our only option at the time was to strip everything back to just the original bill or not pass anything at all. So this is an issue that came up last year when they started passing BEAD, and they realized that when the Trump tax credits happened, that somehow when they made those large amounts of tax changes, that they inadvertently stripped out this exemption from the federal government. And because the state taxable income is what the federal government is, then that's our starting point too. So in effort, the state was going to tax this also. The federal government is still working on this. Congress does have a bill. It's Senate Bill 341 that they're trying to move through now. But we would appreciate the clarification until they do that. I think most of us know that you don't see a lot going on and a lot actually getting across the finish line in D.C. And so we would like Missouri to make a statement that this money that went to these private providers to build out and deploy broadband is to be used for that, and not to just turn around and inadvertently go back as taxes to the state.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Anybody else in favor, please come forward. Claudia, just a minute. Michelle, will you go ahead and call roll?
Senator Cierpiot. Fitzwater. Bean. Bernsketter. Brown. Eslinger. May.
Here.
McCreary. Mosley. Thompson Rader.
We have,
Trent, sorry.
we have a quorum. Proceed, Claudia, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Claudia Sands. I represent Brightspeed and would like to go on record in support of 872.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, Claudia. Anybody else in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Eichelberger, representing the Association of Missouri Electric Cooperatives. We have 15 electric cooperatives who provide broadband in the state, and we would just like to go on record in support of the bill.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anybody else in favor? Any? No. Please fill out a witness form and
Good morning, members of the committee. Philip Arnzen with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We'd like to go on the record in support. Anything we can do to get broadband across our state is helpful for our economy and also for attracting a new workforce and new businesses and also expanding businesses in our state.
thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. In favor, please come forward.
All right, Ben Travlos, Missouri Farm Bureau, here to go on record in support. Here, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anybody else in favor? Anybody else for information purposes? Senator, that will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 872. Thank you very much. Now, before we go to the next bill, I'd like to go ahead and do executive session real quick if we could. I move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We're in executive session. I move that we bring Senate Bill 740 before the committee. Do I have a second? We have a second by Senator Bernsketter. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. 740 is before the committee. This actually, it's. Let me restate that. We also have a Senate committee sub. I'm sorry. So the substitute for everybody, in a moment I'll make a motion on it, is changing the water acquisition part. It's on page 10. It added a sentence that reads, for any acquisition with appraised value over $5 million or less, a decision will be made within 6 months from the date of application. There's also a change in the renewable energy standard on page 28. This is what we talked about that day, that we are doing. It's for the securitization part, are these big energy users, primarily for storm damage. So they are not part of that. I think that language is still in flux. We'll probably deal with it again on the floor. But that's the major changes on the substitute. Does anybody have any questions about the bill or the substitute? Yes, ma'am.
I just want you and the sponsor to know I have problems with businesses being able to opt out of securitization. I think that is setting us up for trouble. We just passed securitization a few years ago, and if the legislature can allow businesses and, people that can afford lobbyists to opt out, I have a big problem with that, so.
I agree with you, Portia. Initially, it was for all of it. Now, when we close or mothball power plants, they're going to be part of that because most of the time, these big companies are after the greens, after renewables anyway, and that's part of the renewable process. So the way I understand this language now, they are carved out. That is they'll be responsible for those costs. It's the storm damage and stuff that they're after, but I think that's a conversation
And, I
absolutely
hear what
worth
you're
having.
saying, but, with climate change happening, we're having more and more extreme storms.
I
want to be thoughtful about how we
Right,
do that, so.
I agree with that completely.
Right.
Anybody else have comments or concerns about the sub or the bill itself?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with Senator McCreary on that part as well.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, then I move that we adopt Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 740. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. So with that, any further discussion on this bill? I move that we do pass Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 740. Michelle, will you please call the roll? Do I have a second first? First, get a second. Michelle, please call the roll.
Senator Cierpiot,
Aye.
Fitzwater, Bean, Bernsketter, Brown, Eslinger,
Aye.
May, McCreary, Mosley, Thompson Raider, and Trent.
By your vote of 8-1, we have voted to pass Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 740. I now move that we bring Senate Bill 741 before the committee. Do I have a second? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. 741 is now before us. It's wholly contained in 740, right? It is wholly contained within 740. It's the water portion of this. We have a sub on it also, with the same changes we just talked about. So is any discussion on that bill? Seeing none. I move that we adopt Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 741. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. So now we have this. We've adopted the Senate Committee sub, and I move that we do pass Senate Committee sub for Senate Bill 740. Do I have a second? Do we have a second? That was close. Any further discussion? Seeing none, then I move that we do pass Senate Committee sub for Senate Bill 740. Michelle, will you call the roll?
Senator Cierpiot,
Aye.
Fitzwater, Bean,
Aye.
Bernsketter, Brown, Eslinger, May, McCreary, Mosley, Thompson Raider, Trent.
By your vote of 9-1, we have voted to pass Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 740. I now move that we leave executive session. Do I have a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We have left executive session. Now we go to Senate Bill 757. Is Senator O'Loughlin in? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Cindy O'Loughlin, Senator from the 18th District. Senate Bill 757 relates to electric power plants. the bill would establish that electric utility companies in Missouri prior to closure of an existing plant must certify they have on the grid reliable generation with equal to or greater capacity from accredited power sources.
Okay.
New replacement energy under this act shall be certified as equal or greater amount of reliable generation by the Public Service Commission and the regional reliability organization in which they operate. Additionally, the act requires that adequate transmission infrastructure that is necessary to interconnect the new reliable generation to the state's electric grid shall be fully operational prior to the closure of the existing power plant. I'm very concerned about the future of power for our state, really across the country. The rush to renewables and the immense amount of federal money that's being poured into that, of course, incentivizes people to go that direction. But at the same time, we are closing down reliable generation, which then results in, when we have severe weather, it results in rolling blackouts. And I believe that, that's very detrimental to the citizens of our state and to our businesses. And I would like to see this bill go through so that we can be sure we can continue to power both our businesses and our homes.
Thank you, Senator. I'm very sympathetic to this, too. We've been in meetings. We've seen what's going on, just like Rush Island going offline here shortly. And I know they're building a lot of wind, but they always give us on the average outputs of those, not day to day. So it's very bothersome. And I'm not sure who is ultimately responsible to make sure that we have reliable generation.
Well, I think the PSC.
I think so, too, but I'm not sure I think rates and things are I guess that's something we need to verify. I've been digging into it a little bit, but it's something that I'd like to do something about this before we have the house on fire. So,
Yes.
Anybody have comments or questions for the senator? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. How many people want to speak in favor of this bill? How many in opposition? Oh, well, how about that? Okay, a couple. First, in favor, please come forward. Just a minute, sir, if I could say something. I've been told that I may have misspoke. I want everybody to know that we actually just voted out Senate Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 740 and 741. I may have misstated one of those bills in the process. So I apologize for that. But as long as the members are clear on what we did. No, we don't have to do it again. I can do it privately. We can do it again. Yeah, that's. Thank you, Senator, for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Anyway, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for letting me speak with you. My name is Rich Axelbaum. I'm a faculty member at Washington University in St. Louis, speaking as an individual. I want to give you a little bit about my credentials. I've been in the energy field for 45 years. I began working with the power generation division of General Electric. I left to work at a solar company, went back to get a master's in solar energy. Then over time became disillusioned with solar primarily because of the reliability issue. Didn't see an opportunity to really expand it at that time. Went in to look at methods of making those technologies that are reliable cleaner. Spent most of my career doing that. I'm the chaired professor of environmental engineering science in the Department of Energy, Environmental, and Chemical Engineering. I have passed out a handout that I'm hoping you can see. There are a number of issues with respect to the direction that we're going. I got this one. And the handout really reflects two of those that I think are very important to Missouri. One of them is land use, and the other one is reliability. I'm not going to speak about the land use right now. I'll focus on reliability. And I want to spend a little focused effort on this because I would like to look at Texas, because I think Texas represents an excellent example of a state that effectively went down a certain path and paid the price for it. So if you can turn to page 14, there's a little bit graphs but if you bear with me, I'd like to walk through these because I hope that if you see this, this will really enlighten you to the importance of this bill. You can see, if you look at the blue line where it's labeled wind, you can see on page 14, you can see it? Oh, no, it don't color. Okay. Well, I tell you what, can I give this to you?
Okay, she's got 2 copies. She has 2 copies.
Color is important. I have one in color if you need an extra. Okay. The one labeled wind, you can see that sometimes it's very high, but notice at some point it goes to almost 0. Notice this was in 2019. So Texas knew, ERCOT knew, that the wind could go to 0. Despite that, if you look on the next page, page 15, you can see what they did is they retired 6,000 megawatts of coal plants and replaced it with wind. Very much what's happening right now across the country. Again, they knew that the wind could go to 0, and they replaced it with wind. If you go to the next slide on page 16, this is Texas in 2021. The same thing happened in 2021. The wind was high, but just when demand in the red started to take off because of the cold day, the wind went down. In other words, our grid is built on systems that say, when you need it, I will provide it. It is not built for systems that say, I'll give it to you when I have it. And that's what happened. It went away, because wind can go away. And the result of that is, if you look at the other ones, coal was peaked out, but they had removed 6,000 megawatts. So it was 6,000 megawatts short. Nuclear was peaked out. Everything was peaked out, and natural gas was pumping out as best it could. But when you strain an electric grid like that, where supply stops meeting demand, the system goes unstable. And when that happens, notice the event. The event is all of a sudden the grid goes unstable, one power plant goes offline after another. And this is what led to 246 deaths. So this bill is about avoiding this problem, plain and simple. Thank you. Any questions?
I have one. I kind of am kind of a nerd. I read and watch stuff. I listened to a guy over the weekend who I respect, and he said in New Mexico, they're either planning or already building a wind farm. The towers are 1,000 feet. Have you heard of those? Because he says that changes it from a 30% efficiency up to 60, 65 because the winds are much more stable at that altitude. Have you heard of those enormous?
On land, typically they're not that large. That would be an offshore, would be that.
Oh, really?
large.
He said in New Mexico, so I don't have the details,
Okay.
but yeah. But,
Yeah, in general, if you look on page 8, this is sort of an example of the typical 2 megawatt land-based wind turbine. It's nearly the size of the Gateway Arch. And if you look on the page before that, page 7, this is showing a coal plant. It's a 3 gigawatt coal plant, 3.1 gigawatt coal plant. Just an example, it takes 5,000 wind turbines the size of the Gateway Arch to replace that one power plant if the wind was reliable.
Right.
When you account for it not being reliable, you're talking about 10 to 15,000 wind turbines to replace a single power plant.
Thank you. Other questions for this witness?
I mentioned real briefly too, one of the important things that's coming up is our demand is increasing. FERC expects 5% growth. With the data centers and electric vehicles, we have to be prepared for a growth in electricity, not a reduction in electricity. So this becomes all the more so important. It's one thing if it's stable. It's another thing if it's growing.
You're right.
And to take a risk on growth is unprecedented.
Senator Eslinger?
I just, of course, what will happen as far as when we don't have power to do all the things that we want to do, but what happens to the cost of power? over time? If we continue on the path, what happens to the cost of power over time?
Part of that is associated with the reliability issue. See, one of the reasons it appears like wind and solar are low cost is they're not dealing with the reliability. So if you have power when they give it to you, then it's relatively low cost. Once you start to build in the need for battery, storage or other forms of storage, then all of a sudden the costs climb. And so what happens, and this is one of the slides I show, wind and solar have a lot of value at a certain amount. You just have to identify what that appropriate amount is. And that amount has to be sufficient that your other reliable source of energy can compensate for when they don't have power. But when you start to build out a large percentage of your grid with those, when you don't have it, there's nothing backing it up. And in fact, if you go to page 18, there's a report that was submitted to the Secretary of Energy in 2018 that details this issue. It's a little bit difficult to follow, but the idea is showing that what happens is what happened in Texas. When you put on more wind and solar, then power plants that used to run 80% of the time now are running 50% of the time. And they can't really keep up that way. They're not affordable. And so you retire them. That's what's happening, like, for example, with Rush Island. The problem is that those plants that you're retiring were exactly the plants that were making it look like you could have wind and solar without a problem, because they were going up when the wind and solar were going down. But now you've retired them because the economics say, I can't afford them anymore. Now they're not there for you anymore. And you don't realize that because it's the weather. And the weather operates in 1 in 10-year events, 1 in 20-year events. We know the weather can be very unpredictable. In certain years, it's unbelievably unpredictable. So you can't build a system that is based on something that you can't predict what it's going to do. And so it's just fundamentally, there's only so much wind and solar capacity you can put on a grid before it's going to force the system to become unstable.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for coming forward. I really appreciate that. Let's switch it up a little bit. I'd like to have the first person in opposition please come forward. I didn't mean to change it up like that, but rather than having, this way people get a kind of a reflection of both.
Morning. My name is Henry Robertson. I represent the Sierra Club. I'm retired from Great Rivers Environmental Law Center, where I engage in utility law at the Public Service Commission. This bill is designed for the electrical grid of the past. It would result in replacing old, obsolete coal-burning power plants with other coal or natural gas-generated power or incredibly expensive nuclear power, contrary to the direction and economics of electricity supply. The bill requires existing thermal generation plants to be replaced with quote-unquote reliable new generation on a megawatt-for-megawatt basis. And in reality, reliable electric generation has been redefined and is continuing to transform. Our regulated utilities are embracing the need for solar and wind generation that is cheaper than existing coal plants, which are rapidly fading away, and natural gas with its price volatility. The reliability of thermal plants is not what it's cracked up to be. In the recent cold in Texas, wind provided 30% of the state's power, and solar arrays charge storage batteries that operate when the sun is down. Meanwhile, gas and coal plants suffered a peak of 7,000 megawatts in outages at a single time. Closer to home, some of Evergy's coal piles froze last month. When that happens, coal can't be broken up and conveyed into the boiler, and so those units had to shut down. And their renewable investments made up for some of that difference. Gas and nuclear plants can be shut down by frozen equipment, while wind, solar, and storage continue to run. The internet and the advent of smart meters have made it possible to ensure reliability with a constant balancing of supply, demand, and energy storage. Demand savings from energy efficiency and voluntary demand reduction at times of peak demand can now be aggregated and dispatched with the reliability of generated power. Energy storage smooths out the intermittency of wind and solar generation. Battery storage is rapidly coming down in cost. New battery chemistries are being pioneered, and electric vehicle batteries will soon be part of the grid. Example of new kind of storage is iron air storage, which provides long-term energy storage through the technology of rust and unrust that powers the electrical battery. Today's grid works by being connected, nimble, and resilient. These bills would strand Missouri in the world of vanishing centralized power plants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Carla? Senator?
Yes.
Carla May, go ahead. Senator May.
I just want some clarification. So you're in favor of the renewable energies like wind, solar, and storage of energy, right?
Yes.
So I think you touched on it a little bit, but ensuring reliability when the wind is non-existent, that is accomplished with the storage of energy. Is that correct? I'm trying to get clarification. I don't want to be confused.
Yeah, well, storage works that sometimes solar is generating more electricity than the grid needs. That can be moved into storage, and that energy from the battery can be released when the sun goes down. So it's a balancing of solar, wind, and storage.
So are we efficiently moving that extra energy into storage, or are we not?
It's still an ongoing process here in Missouri when our utilities still rely heavily on gas and coal, more so than in practically any other state. But we will achieve that.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Nationwide, how much battery storage do we have right now? How much storage do we have to keep the grid going if all the electricity went away?
Oh, as a percentage of
I've read 4 minutes.
how much?
4 minutes
4 minutes of storage?
nationwide.
I don't have a figure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Next person in favor, please come forward. Sir, what is your name? Can I have your name again? I didn't get it when you first said it.
Henry Roberts.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I should have asked you. Tell us who
Thank
you
you,
are and
Mr.
proceed when you're
Chairman.
ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Committee, I'm Randy Eminger, Executive Director of the Energy Policy Network. I'd just like to run through a few factual information and what we're looking at. There's 5 other states that have passed similar electric reliability bills, one of those being Texas, which was talked about earlier. Also, a couple of neighboring states, Kansas and Nebraska, currently have very, very similar bill moving through their legislature at the current time. In the past 8 years, 60 baseload power plants have been closed in the MISO and SPP Southwest Power Pool region. These 60 power plants equaled 22,000 megawatts of electric generation, enough to power over 9 million homes. The key to that is over 90% of the replacement power of these 60 power plants was wind and solar, was intermittent power. And when you look at the scheduled closures that the utilities in the Southwest Power Pool and MISO have scheduled between now and 2030, and the replacement power that they have said we're going to put in place of these power plants, you will have in MISO 45% of the electric generation will be intermittent power. In Southwest Power Pool, it's 56% of the electricity will be wind and solar intermittent generation. What we've found is the rush to renewables in the COVID area was going, or pre-COVID was going pretty good, but post-COVID we found situations where delayed transmission lines, permitting, getting transmission lines, supply chain, getting the solar panels from China, wind turbines, that a lot of them come from China as well. We're finding that there's some local opposition now to a lot of the wind and solar projects. So what we found is utilities scheduled to close a power plant in 2025, 26, 27, but don't have the replacement power put in place. I think this legislation basically guarantees that before you close those plants, even though you've stated in your annual report or your resource plan, we're closing this plan in 2025, 26, that you have to have a guaranteed amount of reliable electricity put in place to replace that. I did have, Mr. Chairman, one example on batteries, and that's Texas. I know Texas has 3,000 megawatts of battery backup. September 6th of last year, they needed that power. It's extremely long summer there, and it was supposed to, the 3,000 megawatts, which is out of 263 megawatts total generation in the state, but the 3,000 megawatts lasted 31 minutes. It was supposed to last over an hour, but it lasted about 31 minutes. Other than that, I would just like to say that I think that the legislation would help with making sure that we have baseload generation in place. We have states around Missouri, like Illinois, that have a zero carbon standard. Minnesota as well, and the Southwest Power Pole on the west side, Colorado and New Mexico both have zero carbon standards. So they are moving down to get rid of all of their fossil generation. That puts a burden on states like Missouri as you generate electricity, and it moves throughout the Southwest Power Pole and the MISO.
You said Texas has this legislation. When did they pass it? Do you know when Texas passed it?
I'm sorry.
When did you said this legislation, Texas has something like it on the books? When did they pass that?
Yeah, it was 2020, 2022.
So it was after their event, or was it after the event they had? Or
Yes,
oh, okay.
yes.
So it was in response
the
to
event they
that.
had was in 2021, so
Okay.
it was after the event.
And Texas is building, so their power companies are building warehouses, I suppose, by power plants full of batteries? Is that how they're doing this battery storage?
I'm not quite sure.
I mean, they take up a lot of space, so there's giant buildings full of batteries down there, I suppose.
That is a lot. Texas being deregulated, their electric reliability legislation was a little different because they're a deregulated state. Basically what they did was they put an incentive for reliability. They have an open market for power, and if you can guarantee you have 80% reliability during a winter storm or a summer heat wave, then you get more money for your power.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Senator McCreevy.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for, I feel like since this hearing on this bill started, no one has talked about the fact that Texas is a deregulated state, and actually the state of to compare Missouri to Texas is not an apples to apples comparison, in my opinion. So can you talk a little bit about how they're set up as a deregulated state and they're not part of these regional transmission organizations, like the state of Missouri is part of 2 different RTOs?
Texas has its own RTO, it's called ERCOT, its own reliability system within the state. And since it is deregulated, what that's done is force out, as the professor said, a lot of baseload generation, because certain times of the year it might be 50, 60, 70% of the year, wind is very inexpensive. Solar might be very inexpensive. But then the rest of the time it's not. So it's very hard. You would believe since 2021 they would have built some new natural gas plants in the state of Texas. There's been one since that event in 2021. The reason is it's not competitive on an open market. If you have somebody bidding in at zero cost because you're getting a federal subsidy of 2.6 cents per kilowatt on wind and solar, you can bid in very low And so it's hard for a coal plant, even a nuclear plant, to compete with the wind and solar because of that 60-70% of the time when the electricity is lower for wind and solar.
Okay. So I just want to clarify, though, you're not suggesting that Missouri become like a standalone state where we're just like, we deregulate, we just take care of our own, and if we follow this bill like to a T, you're not suggesting that?
I'm not suggesting that you,
Okay.
isolate yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Senator May, proceed.
So I'm just getting clarification. So if the times when the electricity for wind and solar is low and has to be subsidized by coal, are we saying we can't do that balance, or we can't? You get what I'm saying? Because, I see this little, argument of either or. So what I'm trying to figure out, is there a balance?
I think so, and I think you can have both. But what we have now basically is a situation where the utilities are closing the power plants, not only closing them, but they're tearing them down so they're not used in the future, and natural gas plants as well. And as I stated, 2 nuclear plants were closed and torn down as well. So, and they're facing EPA regulation, and we understand the utilities, when they look at any plant, they're going to face EPA regulation. But even the Rush Island plant, they could have spent money on wet scrubbers and updated it and kept running Rush Island, but they chose to close it and replace it with renewables.
Senator, you?
I'm done. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next person in opposition, please come forward. Anybody else in opposition? Seeing none. Next person in favor, please come forward. Please tell us who you are and leave your witness form. Thank you.
Chairman and committee members, thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 757. My name is Warren Wood. I'm an engineer. I've spent most of my life in the design, construction, operation, and regulation of coal, nuclear, and natural gas power plants, and I am Missouri's Vice President of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs. So why do we support this legislation? This bill is focused on ensuring we have reliable electricity in the state, which is vital to our modern quality of life. Our company and the electric industry in general continues to watch a steady erosion of the reliability of the grid we have worked so hard to build. In fact, since the last natural gas power plant was brought online in Missouri in 2015, more than 40 power generating units have retired across the state by different utilities. Now, to be clear on that, about 16 of them were 50 megawatts or larger, and about 10 of them were more than 100 megawatts. Primary contributors to this increasing risk of electric outages include retirements of on-demand power plants nationally and in our region, and growing demand with the potential for enormous electric demand growth with the reshoring of industries in the U.S. and the ongoing growth of high tech in all areas of our lives. Electric service providers are seeing these risks show up in reduced reserve margins. Basically, this is our ability as an electric service provider to manage extreme weather peak demand periods when some power plants fail to operate. Senate Bill 757 provides a strong policy edict that electric service providers shall not retire a power plant before they have acquired capacity from another power source of equal or greater capacity. We support the policy with some practical timing issues being addressed. These timing issues include building a new power plant on the same site as a retiring plant due to overlapping infrastructure and transmission interconnection issues, the practical limitations of how quickly a new power plant can be built following an unexpected or unplanned event, and the closure of the Rush Island plant. We further recommend the legislation be amended to take the next important step of implementing policy to ensure an appropriate planning process is adhered to with regulatory oversight and stakeholder involvement that gets generating plants built and operational. I envision a process like the one outlined in Senate Bill 1247, where the utility would bring its plans and justification for a new plant to the Missouri Public Service Commission for review. All interested parties would then have the opportunity to question and assess the plan based on all the best information available at the time and determine if the electric service provider's plan is reasonable. This assessment will largely come down to if the power plant meets a given need, such as ensuring reliability and mitigating exposure to volatile markets, is compliant with the law, and most importantly overall is in the best interest of our customers. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify in support of this legislation. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. So I'm curious, when you guys, when the industry makes a decision to close a power plant, how much of that is EPA induced and how much of that is the old facilities ready to move on?
Well, I can speak to our circumstances. I mean, outside of the Roche Island case, which is a whole nother, case study, looking at other older plants, like we closed Merrimack last year. It was quite old, older than I am, which is pretty old for a coal-fired power plant. You can do things to upgrade some of the different components of the boiler through time. You can do things to comply with environmental regulations as you continue to operate it. The underlying engineering of that power plant isn't as efficient as new plants over time. And over time, you begin to get in, you've done components, but you begin to have a lot of high pressure, high temperature piping that becomes dangerous to operate around and continue working with. So at some point, you begin to look at your increasing risk of operating the unit, and you have to close it. And you also get to the point you may have additional regulations come along that make it inoperable from a cost perspective.
Okay.
So we reach that point where it just becomes uneconomic or unsafe, and then we retire the unit.
Thank you. Questions for Senator Baker?
I don't know if you're able to answer this question, but it's a question. So far as so we're talking about, when we're talking about renewable energy and things like that and the coal plants, can you answer this question as far as health outcomes for workers in coal plants?
Yes.
What is that? I don't think we ever figure that into the equation. Is there, do you have any information in reference to that?
I do not have reference to the operation or working in coal-fired power plants. I have been in power plants many times, and in terms of exposure to coal dust, things like that, is nothing like operating a coal mine, for example. I mean, I don't see any indication that we have any additional health issues whatsoever with the plant. You're not really exposed to the pollutants of any of those materials much in the plant.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator McCarty.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So when you look at how this bill is written, I'm just wondering if you think that the state has the authority to tell your company, a private for-profit company, that they can't close a plant. I'm not seeing that is anything that we can do, because you're not a government agency. You're a company with a board and a CEO and everything.
I mean, an interesting discussion, and actually I have a regulatory attorney here that may have to come back and correct me, but let me give you what I believe the answer to your question is. So can we be ordered to, can you keep us from closing a plant?
Right.
Well, if we spent a large sum of money, built a power plant, it was operating well, and for some reason that had no justification, we shut that unit down, I think you'd be exposed to an imprudent expenditure. That we put all this money into, we have it operating, we don't have a good reason why we shut it down, and you'd have an issue. Now, if you clearly have a federal government, judge and an appeals court says this unit can no longer operate, or they say you can only operate it if you do something very expensive that isn't in the interest of our customers, that's a different discussion.
Okay. Well, I think the interesting dynamic is you're testifying on this bill, but then you reference a bill that we haven't heard yet, 1247, and there are a lot of things in 1247 that kind of contradict what I think would be in the best interest of our constituents as it relates to these kinds of things. So I hope you'll testify on 1247. Yep. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Seeing none. Thank you. Nobody's opposed, so the next person in favor, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Jason Clint with Evergy, the IOU serving the western side of the state. If I could, I'd like to start my remarks on page 8 of my testimony. I kid, I don't have 8 pages of testimony. Mr. Chairman, I agree with what Ameren said largely, that I think that this is a bill that makes some sense. I think there's some changes that would make us a little bit more comfortable. He talked a little bit about those. We'll talk with the sponsor about those in the future. But in general, we still do need dispatchable power. We need the ability for when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, we have to have that dispatchable power available. So we're in support of this bill, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Senator McCrory.
Similar question for you. So there have been situations in the state in my lifetime where the EPA has told a company that they have to do something, and if they don't put the scrubbers on or whatever, they have to close. So what if the EPA tells a company like yours that you have to close, but you don't have replacement power?
I don't think that this bill precludes our ability to replace that. So that's part of the timeline issue that I think we need to work through. But absolutely, we follow the rules. So if the EPA tells us something has to be shut down, we would do that. I'm not aware of a situation where the EPA has said you will shut it down tomorrow, though. I think there's generally a timeline that we would have to take into account.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Next person in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, President of Associated Industries in Missouri, want to go on record in support of this legislation. You know, we represent manufacturing operations across the state. You may remember during the winter storm Uri, when we started losing power, one of the very first places to start losing their power were the manufacturing plants across the state, which is extremely expensive and can be very detrimental. We've talked recently about the closure of the metal plant, and the predecessor to that plant was Noranda Aluminum. And during one outage, all of the aluminum set up inside their equipment, and they had to replace all of their equipment, which was cost prohibitive and eventually led to the demise. So while it can be an economic inconvenience or very expensive for manufacturing operations, it can also be very critical when you're talking about hospitals not having power. And I think over the last couple of summers, at the beginning of the summer, we've seen statements from the MISO saying that because other states have gone so far down the renewable path, you know, we are having problems or could potentially have problems in the state of Missouri, even though we have pretty reliable generation here now. We want to establish the policy that keeps us from going further down the path until technology can catch up and provide stable and baseload power from renewable sources. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ray. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Anybody else in favor?
Lisa Finette, Armor Vine. We just want to come in support of this bill. I think Senator McCreary.
Can I ask you to state your name again? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa Finette, Armor Vine, and Senator McCreary. I think you and I worked together against a bill many years ago that did pass with Senator Emery, and it had a lot of these issues in it. So many of these issues were brought forth by the legislature in mandating certain solar and wind requirements, and this is just common sense legislation. I mean, if we can't have solar and wind that's dependable, then we need to be able to keep some of the existing generation.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Anybody else in favor? I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Philip Arnzen with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we'd like to go on the record in support. In our annual CEO survey, when it comes to energy policy, the most important criteria that CEOs care about is having reliable access to energy. And so we believe this bill would make sure that we continue to have reliable access in our state.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you, Phil. Anybody else in favor? Please come through.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ben Travelis with Missouri Farm Bureau here to go on record in support. We appreciate the senator really prioritizing reliability of these projects, and I think this bill does that. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. Anybody else in favor? Anybody for information purposes? Are you for information purposes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, my name is Rebecca Eichelberger with the Association of Missouri Electric Cooperatives. We are wanting to go on record for informational purposes as this bill relates to PSC regulated utilities. However, we are very concerned with ensuring reliability of energy in Missouri and support efforts to ensure that reliability. We have a diverse generating portfolio, and we appreciate the ability to have that, and we have no plans to retire any of our baseload generation in the state.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you. Senator Roloff, do you have any closing comments?
It's a very popular bill. We all want our electricity to stay on.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank
That
you.
will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 757. Next up will be Senate Bill 1247. Sure. Senator Black? Is he not here? I'd make You gotta leave? So,
But he has a bill he's presenting.
no, you don't.
No, you don't. That's fine.
Senator Black, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rusty Black, and I represent the 12th Senate District. Senate Bill 1247 has been introduced in response to the pressing need for reliable baseload power. Recognizing the increasing demand for on-demand energy independent of weather conditions, the bill aims to ensure a stable energy supply amidst a shifting landscape of economic development. With burgeoning projects like large manufacturing facilities and data centers on the horizon, the necessity for continuous 24/7 power generation is paramount. Recently, MISO and NERC said in an assessment that they face a 1,300 megawatt shortfall beginning next summer, which continues to grow throughout the 10-year assessment period as coal, nuclear, and natural gas generation retire faster than replacement resources are connecting. This bill emphasizes the importance of pre-planning through predetermination process, which in a successful model in 26 other states, including Kansas. This entails prospective companies presenting their generation plans to regulatory bodies such as the Public Service Commission, as well as other parties for approval before embarking on multi-year, high-cost projects. Such preemptive measures offer both assurance to consumers and confidence to companies investing significant resources. Why undertake something so large without the certainty that it was the right direction? Senate Bill 1247 also addresses financial mechanisms crucial for project viability by aligning legislation with previous measures aimed at facilitating infrastructure development. This bill seeks to streamline regulatory processes and mitigate historic barriers to investment. Importantly, the bill does not compromise oversight by the Public Service Commission. While predetermination streamlines decision-making on projects viability, it maintains the PSC's authority to scrutinize operational aspects and recover funds in cases of poor contracting, mismanagement, etc. Ultimately, Senate Bill 1247 aims to bolster Missouri's capacity to meet the demands of prospective large-scale projects, safeguarding the state's economic growth and fostering job creation and reliable energy. Lastly, I have met with the Public Service Commission regarding some of their concerns and will continue to have those discussions. One specifically regarding the IRP, Integrated Resource Plan, filing as justification for new facilities. I disagree that this bill in its current form would allow for this, but we'll be happy to add language to clear up any confusion. Before I say thank you, let's go back to the just regular Rusty Black instead of a nice prepared statement. I do believe that, you know, in my lifetime we've reached a point where we probably need to have this discussion and figure out how to do generation. Because we've sat around where I live at and understand wind towers are a valuable asset in northwest Missouri for taxing, yeah, look at somebody smile, all over the place. I have neighbors that don't like them and yell at me about that. I have neighbors that yell at me and say, don't ever take them away. This is not green versus non-green. This discussion, how do we make sure that we have liability or we have reliability? I do live with a lot of people in my district that knows how to live without electricity. They do it daily. And they have horses and nice buggies, but the vast majority of the people in northwest Missouri are not ready to go without electricity. It is very, very important, so that's why I bring this bill forward. And with that, I'd answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Questions? Senator McBride.
All right, Senator, so one of the things you said that I just have to disagree with you on, is that, can you hear me all right? That the way your bill is written is that the PSC, the Public Service Commission, still has authority. Everything that I see in this bill actually ties the hands of the Public Service Commission. So one of the concerns I have, and I wanted to understand your reasoning for this, is it kind of locks in these predetermined rate-making principles, and so it would tie the hands of the Public Service Commission going forward. And as you know, like, all kinds of things can change. And so I feel like this really takes away a lot of discretion from our commissioners in order to respond to changing conditions. So what was your reasoning for saying that, like, once they predetermine the rate-making principle, that it's locked in for life? There's no flexibility.
The PSC, the way I understand this, and I'm not an attorney, but I've sat and listened to it both from the PSC side as well as from the proponents of this legislation that I've worked with. The PSC is still going to approve, the understanding that I have, approve these resources, or the fact that these plants are going to come on. They're going to decide that this is what's going to happen, PSC, going to approve this window, and then if that plant's built within inside of that window that's been agreed upon, that's what the rate is going to be set on, that the PSC has made the approval for this. And then if the generator or whoever's building the new plant get outside of that window, the understanding that I have through the language or been explained to me, the PSC couldn't allow them. I think whenever the PSC was in my office, they talked about, well, if we're going to build a 2-story plant, then we decide to build a 3-story. And I think that was just for somebody ignorant like me to understand that if only 2 floors have been provided on this structure, if a company decides to build the 3rd floor on it, that 3rd floor is not covered. It's not going to be part of the rate that has already been determined by the PSC to be okay with that plant. So that is the way, Senator, that I understand that. And there's people behind me that spent their career dealing with on both sides, right? That'll probably be able to clean that up and make it better. And I'm doing it. I'm answering you in the way I understand.
No, and I appreciate that. And I mean, ultimately, it's us senators that have to figure this out.
Right.
But you know, I'm trying to understand. I only see it benefiting the company. I don't see it helping our constituents at all by locking in some kind of rate-making guarantee for the companies. Because if things go terribly wrong, then businesses and our constituents are left holding the bag. And we've seen things go wrong in Missouri. We've also seen things go wrong in other states, and I would like to learn lessons from some of those. So another thing I wanted to ask you about had to do with the resource plans that, that the different investor-owned utilities have. My understanding is those aren't legally binding. They're just like, you know, the company shares their plans with the PSC, but they can decide to do something, to not do something, that kind of thing. And so I'm seeing some conflict in this bill with like a reliance on these resource plans as if they're binding with the Public Service Commission. So can you talk through how you would change, like, what your plans are to make these resource plans, like, firm?
Well, the resource plans, the understanding I have, about how often, Senator, do those have to be turned into the Public Service Commission? Do you remember the number of years those plans are sent to Public Service Commission?
I think every couple of years, but it's also kind of a living, breathing document too, in a way.
It's like any goal that I've ever made in my life. Here's the goal that I'm going to, and today this is how I'm going to get there, but tomorrow something may change to make me go a different direction. I'm still trying to get to that goal. My understanding with this plan, it's turned into the PSC, and it is somewhat a checkmark system, like Rusty would be doing with my curriculum.
It's an unbinding notice. It's just they have to do it, but it's not binding.
Yes, because it's a goal. It's a plan put together. These are the goals. These are the things that we're seeing. And Public Service Commission at this point in time, my understanding is, they've not used it to put any teeth in either. It's just something to make sure that they, PSC, our Public Service Commission, that I'm also a person that pays for electricity at my house. They try to understand what this forward-looking goal is and work together with PSC and the different IOUs to know this is what the future looks like. If we go to the part that you're thinking I'm going around you on and not answering, when it comes to the generation plants, I believe in this legislation, the way it's been put forward to me, is this plan that you're talking about, even when PSC makes a check mark, does not approve the generation. Even with what I'm doing, the PSC is still going to be involved with this new generation plan, approving that facility and the cost around that facility. So maybe I'm not well enough, maybe I don't understand it well enough, or maybe whoever's talking to you don't understand it well enough, and maybe we need a sentence to make sure that that's there. I don't know whether that exactly answers what you were saying, but that's the way I heard the question.
It doesn't, but we can continue the conversation on that. So another question I have has to do with the amount of time for the PSC to issue decisions. I was wondering how you came up with 180 days, and if it's not approved, if no decision is issued, it's automatically approved. From some of the records that I can see, when you just look at cases from in Missouri in years past, a lot of times those cases can take, over 300 days. So I'm quite concerned that we're putting a lot of strain on the PSC and the team to do something in just 180 days. So how did you come up with that amount?
Half a year, that's how I come up with it.
Okay.
Okay. Not a magic thing, or I didn't have a dream that come up with it. It's half a year.
Okay. Well, I feel like these are multi-million-dollar decisions that have a huge impact on all of our constituents, and I want the decision to be thoughtful and deliberative, and I want the team to have enough time to do their work. So hopefully you're open to talking about that time. So very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the Senator? Seeing none. How many people want to speak? Oh, I'm sorry. Senator, proceed.
I'm just curious, what other issues did PSC have with your bill?
Senator, do you have the list? They dropped by my office. I think that's laying on my table. There were 5 or 6 things, probably more than that, bulleted on the list of concerns that they had. And no, I don't remember each and every one of them. I did read them last night again.
Okay. Can you give me a copy of that, if possible?
Could I what?
Give me a copy of what they told you they had a problem with.
Any other questions? Seeing none. How many, let me try again. How many people want to speak in favor of this bill? How many in opposition? Okay, it's a little more balanced. First person in favor, please come forward. And time is getting late. I have one more bill, so if you could be as prompt as quick, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, Jason Clint, Senior Director of External Affairs for Evergy. I'm going to be very quick, but I will be happy to take your questions if you need me to expand. But I want to just talk about the why quickly. I don't want to jump over that. We are seeing at Evergy and really nationwide, we are seeing an explosion in economic development projects. This bill is really about jobs. It is about growth. It is driven by 4 factors that we're seeing. We're seeing the reshoring from the Far East coming back to the United States, advanced manufacturing. We're seeing growth in technologies like battery manufacturers, which are huge power users. Data centers, as you've talked about, are huge power centers. The CHIPS Act, semiconductors, we're seeing those both in Kansas and Missouri. Again, all these large power users. To set the scene, in 2019, when the Department of Economic Development would send out projects in Missouri, the average size project was 2 megawatts. That's the size of a light manufacturer. In 2022, the average size was 76 megawatts. That's the size of a large auto manufacturing plant. So we have had a huge increase in our power needs. Evergy is going to have to build capacity as we look at the economic development pipeline that is swirling around us. And that's why we bring this bill here, Mr. Chairman, because as the pie grows, the dispatchable generation that supports it underneath it also has to grow. So this bill does really 2 things that help build generation. It allows for predetermination. It is what it sounds like. It's we go to the PSC in advance and get a yes or a no from them, so that we get a predetermined. I think of it almost more like a certificate of need and necessity than I do of anything. But we go there to get a yes or no. It's not uncommon. 26 states have some type of generation predetermination, including Kansas and many of our neighbors. The second thing the bill does is it allows PISA for generation. So we currently have PISA for distribution here in Missouri. Same concept. The amount that is deferred and cannot be collected until after a rate case, but we don't lose potentially years of depreciation on that large asset. The bill's really about reliability and jobs. It's critical for us to be able to continue to grow the economy, to have capacity to be able to serve them. Without that, we're going to very quickly be in a situation where when folks come to Missouri and are looking for capacity and energy, we're going to have to say no thank you, because we simply are running out of energy. That is my testimony. I did want to take a couple of Senator McCreary's questions, so I save her the of having to repeat them in the interest of time. The 180 days, that is similar to Kansas. So Kansas has 180 days for predetermination. And again, that's the only thing. You mentioned rate cases. Predetermination is the only thing that's being determined in that case. So 180 days, I feel like if Kansas can do it, surely Missouri can do it. Your other questions, Senator, I'll be happy to take those when you're ready for them. I don't know that I remember. I didn't get all 3 of them written down.
Thank you, Senator. So one of the questions I have for you then, because you made your spiel about jobs.
Yes.
So on page 8 of the bill, in that section, subsection 4, basically, like I'm trying to figure out what is the purpose of locking in provisions of owning facilities rather than purchasing through, purchasing power. How does that benefit my constituents?
Well, we, as you know, to be a part of the Southwest Power Pool, and I assume it's the same for MISO. I guess I don't know MISO off the top of my head, but as a part of the Southwest Power Pool, we have to be able to not only meet our generation needs, we have to have 15% above that. we have to own that amount of we have to have that amount of generation that's available to us to even be a part of the Southwest Power Pool. So again, as that threshold is increasing, we're going to have to increase the generation. There's not as much power purchase available from a fossil fuel or from a dispatchable power perspective. So it's going to have something that we are probably going to have to build.
I mean, to me, as as just a legislator looking at this, that it's in the interest of the state of Missouri for electrical corporations to ensure that they own and operate sufficient generating resources. I mean, that's a big policy change, and it feels to me like, and then it goes on to say that they need to be able to serve their retail load without undue reliance on any power pool. I feel like we're starting, I mean, if you just listen to this hearing today, it seems like we're starting to go into this area where we want to be isolationists and just have it just be all about Missouri.
No, but again, what I said previously, in order to be a part of the power pool, not only do you have to serve your own native load, you have to have a 15% reserve margin above that. So that's not new. That's always been a condition of being a part of the Southwest Power Pool. That's right. And our load is about to grow.
So what does page 8 of the bill mean then when it says without undue reliance on any power pool?
Senator,
okay.
I'll come to your office.
Okay, I'm just trying to.
Off the top of my head, I haven't read through specific sections this morning, so I need to reread that before I come and offer a non-lawyer advice on it.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer either, so thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Person opposed, please come forward. Now, I'm not rushing people, but be as concise as you can.
I'll do my best. My name is John Kaufman. I'm a registered lobbyist for the Consumers Council of Missouri, here to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 1247. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Our opposition to this legislation is that it would unfairly impact electric rates for residential, small business customers, in fact, almost all of the customers of the state, and would have a pretty enormous negative impact on the state's economy. There are a lot of bills floating around this year that I think threaten the affordability of utility rates, and the interest of the organization that I here for, care about people who are struggling and who may not even be able to pay the utility bills that they currently have. But this, the construction work in progress, which is not necessarily, it's not really advertised in this bill, but it's kind of buried in that subsection 5, where it mentions 393-135 and says, notwithstanding that, the commission can do other things. So I mostly want to focus on that, construction work in progress, CWIP, or QUIP. So when I say QUIP, that's what I'm referring to. And this is something that Missouri voters overwhelmingly rejected through a voter-led initiative a couple decades ago, and it was not even close. And this issue, so this issue has been debated for now over 50 years. This QUIP charges, which is basically the practice of charging consumers for power plants that are not benefiting them, that are still in construction and may or may not actually be completed. And so that is the principle that is, I think, fundamentally concerning. And I think it's important to remember that we're talking here about investor-owned utilities that charge to their consumers a profit level, which is, in Missouri, nearly 10%. And so this profit is built into the rates. And I am a lawyer, and as I understand regulation, the point of that is for the utility to bear the risk. And we'd like, and then reward them for taking the risk and actually producing power for us. The problem is when they don't take the risk, but then force the ratepayers to make the investment and then earn a profit on the investment that the ratepayers had provided them. Regulation at the Public Service Commission works well when the utilities have skin in the game, when they really have something at risk. And that's when we see these projects coming in under budget and coming in at an efficient level. Time and time again around the country, when QUIP has been used, we see cost overruns, not just small cost overruns, but enormous cost overruns. The most recent large plant is a nuclear plant in Georgia, the Vogtle plant, came in, is $34 billion, or maybe $35 billion I saw yesterday, and that is maybe 3 times what it was originally projected to be. And I think probably the best cautionary tale for you to understand is South Carolina. South Carolina, SCE&G, they went ahead with a coal plant through some QIP legislation they called the Base Load Review Act, and they did it after Missouri rejected it. Missouri came very close in 2009 in overturning the will of the voters and passing a QIP bill. But what happened is that South Carolina went ahead with it, and Westinghouse went there, and about 6 years they charged, higher and higher rates went up, 30%, more, and started collecting billions of dollars from residential customers and large customers as well, and they got nothing for it. The plant was canceled. And so then there was a crisis. It was such a bad impact that it actually lowered the bond rating of the entire state of South Carolina. So, I'm not just being a Cassandra here. I'm telling you, this is something that could severely impact the finances of Missouri. And I think that before you go forward, don't listen to me, but reach out to your colleagues, people who were in South Carolina when that vote was taken. I've talked to some of those folks, and not one of them, is happy with their vote. They regret what they did, because there is just now a big pile of concrete and rusting steel and angry people that they paid such high rates and got nothing for it. So at this point, I would just say, if this bill moves forward, at the very least, work on language that will protect consumers and give consumers a refund if that happens, if something doesn't go through. And I would urge you to use the interim subject to refund language and have some sort of clawback in case that happens, because everyone in South Carolina was saying, like, why didn't we think about this? And this legislation ties our hands. And this is similar to the situation you don't want to be in with this predetermination legislation, because most of the time these projects work well. Callaway was a fantastic project. It was built mostly without QIP. It started off with QIP, but then was not done, and it came in and has been a very efficient, very good power plant for our state. But the problem with, things look good in the blueprint stage, but if you use these pre-approval or predetermination statutes, you'll very often have a situation where no one expected this to happen, or something went wrong, and then you're stuck. And we want the Public Service Commission in those crises to be able to have the tools to respond and to protect consumers and not have their hands tied by these rate-making pre-approval principles. So that's the main thing that I would point you to. Also, I would also suggest that you look, if you want to do this, that you make some sort of provision for a refund if the plant does not work out or something goes wrong. Secondly, I would ask that you take out the profit. The utility should not be profiting if it's not their money being used, if they're not putting it at risk, and put something in there that gives the utility some incentive, some skin in the game, positive and negative, that they come in under budget. And because these projects are just ginormous. We're talking billions and billions of dollars. It's not like a lot of this other stuff is, tens of millions or hundreds of millions. We're talking here about billions with a B. I just, for the interest of time, I'll stop there. There's some other things that I am concerned about, as far as I think maybe the PSC is looking about after their own interest in having the flexibility to respond. But we need the Public Service Commission to be able to have the tools and be able to respond to things as they develop. That's my testimony. Thanks.
Thank you. Just for saving time, would you make an appointment to come by my office? I'd like to talk to you about the QIP.
I would.
Side of it.
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Pardon me? Okay. Thank you very much. Next person in favor, please come forward. And once again, please I hate to rush people, but we got one more bill. I don't think it's going to be easy either.
Fast.
Thank you.
Very good. Chairman, committee members, thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 1247. My name is Warren Wood, same Vice President, Legislative Regulatory Affairs for Ameren, Missouri. Like Senate Bill 757, this bill is focused on ensuring we have reliable electricity, which is vital, as we discussed earlier. While Senate Bill 757 set down the policy edict for capacity, Senate Bill 1247 takes the next important step of implementing policy to get generating plants built and operational. Under the provisions of Senate Bill 1247, an electric service provider could bring its plans and justifications for a new power plant, transmission project, or plant retirement to the Public Service Commission for review and request predetermination on how that infrastructure will be treated in future commission proceedings. The electric service provider's justification would include how that generation resource plan fits into the integrated resource plan's preferred plan. All interested parties would have the opportunity to question and assess the plan based on all the best information available at the time. And important to some of the questions here, let me highlight this as well. The Public Service Commission retains broad rights to decide if the project is reasonable and to reject it if it is not reasonable. The determination of reasonableness will largely come down to if the power project meets a given need, such as ensuring reliability, is compliant with the law, and most importantly, is in the best interest of our customers. If the Public Service Commission determines a new power plant or transmission project is reasonable, the electric service provider must then determine if they will proceed with the project or not. If the Public Service Commission determines a new natural gas or small modular nuclear power plant is reasonable, the electric service provider can choose between two approaches. One is a construction work in progress approach, but I would note very different than how you've seen in QIP in other states. This is just for the financing portion. It's to avoid that compounding financing cost. I was glad to hear a compliment to the Callaway project. The anti-QIP statute on that project added $900 million to the cost because of the compounding financing cost over the years that unit was built. Customers are still paying for that today. And then the other mechanism would be a regulatory mechanism to accurately account for prudently incurred capital and financing costs recovered after the natural gas or small modular nuclear plant starts serving customers. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, Warren.
Thank you.
Next person in opposition, please come forward.
Henry Robertson for Sierra Club again. I don't need to argue the QIP issue after the excellent job that Mr. Kaufman did. I don't need to belabor the reliability issue except to reiterate that it's a myth that fossil fuels and new thermal plants in general are always reliable. Renewables are always unreliable. We're seeing that change. It's interesting to note that both Ameren and Evergy have plans publicly pledged to go to 100% renewables by 2050. In Ameren's case, maybe even a little earlier in Evergy's case. They're not going to get there if they build new thermal plants that they expect to have operating for 30, 40, 50 years to recover their costs. Most of this bill is about the rate-making process. Utilities are monopolies. They're subject to tighter regulation than other industries as such, and they're always chafing at that regulation and coming to the legislature to ask for relief. Here they're trying to take as much control of the rate-making process as possible. As Senator McCreary said, they're given a tight deadline, absolutely binding deadline to decide these cases on the rate-making treatment of their plants. And if the commission doesn't meet that deadline, then the utilities plan is adopted, deemed approved in its entirety, and is binding in any future case concerning the cost of those plants. The utility can also combine this proceeding with a request for a certificate of convenience and necessity, or CCN. The purpose of the CCN is to determine, is this plant needed? Is it feasible? Is it in the public interest? Well, it makes no sense to have this going simultaneously on the same track as rate-making treatment, because until the plant is approved, there's no sense in deciding its rate-making treatment. So that's a waste of resources, and again, it's a way to catch the utility, the commission in a two-track, a CCN and a rate-making case going on simultaneously with a tough deadline that they're required to meet, or the utility wins. Thank you. I think I'll conclude with that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Senator Mosby.
Can you speak on how the plant will harm the environment, or if it will harm the environment or people?
Which plan?
The plants that they're
Well,
power plants. Yeah.
they're contemplating, I believe, fossil fuel plants, possibly nuclear plants. The reason the utilities are pledging to go to 100% renewables is we need to get off fossil fuels entirely if we're going to prevent the continuing deterioration of our climate, which is, really what we're arguing about is all these extreme weather events. How are we going to deal with them? Well, the opposite of how we deal with them is to persist in building new fossil generation. Does that answer your question, or did I understand it?
My question was, will it cause any type of harm to consumers, or will people that live by the power plants or anything like that, like any type of...
Yes, well, coal is prohibitively expensive. That will harm consumers. Pollution continues to be a problem. And natural gas, we have the price volatility and the damage caused by the process of hydraulic fracturing, which can contaminate water and even cause earthquakes. Possibility.
So, Senator, do you know if these power plants will be built near residents, or where would they be built, or anything like that? That's all I want.
With the IOUs that have been up here, no, I don't have any idea whether they've found a location that they're thinking about building a power plant within the electric co-op, which is where I pay my electric bill in the north part of the state. There is a proposed new gas plant going in on the very eastern side of my district, southeastern side. Of course, there's humans that live there.
Do you know how many power plants are going to be built or need to be built?
No.
Okay.
No.
So that would also factor in the cost as well to the consumers. How many plants?
Certainly, if you build someplace, whether it's a wind tower or a power plant, the ultimate consumer is going to pay for that being constructed, right? And there's probably none of it's done in a giveaway program. Does that answer? Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next in favor, please come forward. Are you in favor? Okay, let me see if anybody's in favor. Anybody in favor of this bill? Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, Shannon Cooper today representing the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. I'll be brief because you all know I'm not a utilities expert, but as Mr. Clint stated earlier, one of the major concerns we have in the Kansas City region, to add to our lack of employees, is the fact that when these large-scale manufacturing plants look at our region, we're competing with other states. The fact of the matter is there is a great concern that we will not have enough energy to fuel them. So for that reason, we are here today to support this legislation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Now, next person in opposition, please come forward.
My name is Diana Plusha, and I'm an attorney for the Missouri Industrial Energy Consumers. I'm a lawyer at Curtis Hines, Garrett, and O'Keefe. I represent some of the largest power users of Ameren and Evergy. And these companies really form the economic base of Missouri. They've been represented by my firm for many years. In fact, they've been active in front of the legislature and the PSC for over 40 years. and that's how important energy rates are to them. We're very concerned about this bill because of the level of risk that it shifts to consumers, to the point that the utility is bearing almost no risk to justify its actual returns on investment. When you shift the level of risk of business decisions by the utility, like what kind of plants they should build, how they should execute those plans, and pre-approve rate-making treatment before a plant is even built, that is shifting the fundamental risk. One of the only things that the utility has complete risk for is to bear the prudence and the management of its projects. This ties the PSC's hands, and I would say, given the fact that the Missouri law bans customer choice of electric supplier, I think that should be reconsidered if you were to adopt something like this, which really takes the utilities management decisions cannot be made by the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission is to protect the public. It's to make sure the utilities are earning fair returns. It's to make sure that we have reliable systems, in the sense that they're looking at what the utilities plans are. They're not making decisions. And at the end, it's when the rates are decided that the commission is making that decision, looking back at what the utility has done. There is no possible way that the Missouri Public Service Commission can make an informed decision about a project that hasn't even started yet. For manufacturers, the risk of these projects and not knowing how much money will be spent and how they'll be managed is a risk that we can't bear in knowing what our costs will be from year to year. Ameren alone has plans to build $13.5 billion in new generation, a variety of generation, including renewables, and 9.5 of that is renewables by 2036. We estimate that this bill and the risk that it shifts and the additional cost that we'll bear because of different, cost overruns, which have typically occurred in other states. I mean, there's a long record of this type of legislation costing money. We think that that will cost an additional 30%, which is about $4 billion under current plans. And we fully expect that we're going to see additional projects being announced by the utilities with every integrated resource plan they file with the PSC. That's where those numbers are coming from. I would say that, given the fact that for every manufacturing job, that creates 3 jobs in the state, I think it's putting the cart before the horse to take the utilities that are here to serve the economy and are granted a monopoly to do so, to actually start charging so much that they put manufacturers out of business. And I think that could happen because you have greater risk, greater cost, and not a very favorable environment for energy costs. You'll find that manufacturers who have options to compete might move to other states with a better regulatory environment for utilities. You might find that these companies compete globally. So really, you might lose manufacturing jobs, which will leave more costs left for the captive residential customers who can't change locations. So to draw manufacturers here, good for the economy. To keep reasonable electric rates that are predictable is good for the economy. This bill takes an opposite direction, and I would urge you to, at a minimum, make some very significant changes to the bill and consider customer choice of supplier if you're going to go in this direction and offer that option.
Thank you. Questions, Ms. Senator Carter, go ahead.
So I think I've already asked somebody this question, but I'm trying to figure out what the motive of the investor-owned utilities, what their motive is. And, they have shareholders. My understanding is the shareholders make money on facilities that are owned by the utility, but they don't necessarily get a return on the power purchases. So do you think this is one of the reasons why they're trying to shift gears and actually own generation facilities?
Absolutely. The more utilities spend, the more they make. They earn a return on their rate base. So utilities have a tremendous incentive built into the law to spend as much as they can on projects. In fact, they're retiring coal plants that still could be used, and they're adding renewable generation, which is more expensive, and there are a variety of reasons for that. We're not necessarily opposed to it, but the bottom line is we have no shortage of generation. The utilities are making plenty of money. They want to increase their returns by building more. That's why it's really important that you have oversight, that projects don't become, over budget, that you're not doing unnecessary spending, and having to pre-approve these projects early on without regard to how much they will end up costing in the end, that just increases that incentive. And it's their fiduciary duty to make money for their shareholders, and I understand that. It's the commission's job and it's the legislature's job to make sure all of the incentives are in balance. So I would say I agree with you. They do have an incentive to build power plants and generation. It's not unreasonable for them to do that, but it is dangerous, I think, from the perspective of what rates are going to do and for our economy to just have, you know, a pre-approval of everything the utilities say they're going to do.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else in favor, please come forward. Senator Razer will be with you in just a minute.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Philip Arnzen with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we'd just like to go on the record in support. You know, as I mentioned earlier, our CEO survey, when it comes to energy policy, reliable access to energy, including electricity, was the top concern, and this helps make sure that our publicly owned utilities are able to continue to provide reliable and resilient electricity.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Anybody else in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jay Hardenbrook. I'm the Advocacy Director for AARP here in the state of Missouri. We are a social change organization with a membership of over 700,000 here in the state of Missouri. Legislation like this comes up from time to time, as we all know, and the thing that concerns us the most is that it takes that risk away from the private monopoly utilities and puts it onto their customer base. And in our case, that's the many people over age 50 who have to pay those rates. There are a couple of concerns with that. First of all, that being that if they are assuming all of the risk, why are we continuing to pay a rate of return for the risk on top of our other rate bills? So we're both operating as the investor, but we're also paying an extra for the risk that they never had to take. That is definitely a concern of ours. Another concern certainly is that this is not a project that is online yet. It is just a project. Many of our members will wind up paying for these improvements that they will never ever see. And so that is definitely something else that is a major concern of ours. Thank you so much.
Anybody else in favor? Please be brief.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Rich Aubuchon. I'm here on behalf of Hunt Midwest. They're a developer in Kansas City. Right now, if you go up to Kansas City by I-435, you'll see worlds of fun, right? Underneath that is a subtropolis that's about 8 million square feet of leasable space. Up by the airport, we have 3,000 acres, contiguous acres, the largest in the world of underground at Subtropolis, and the largest project in Missouri for a mega project right by the airport. Without power, we don't get new projects in Missouri. Simply put, if we don't have power, we can't get them. That's happening right now. We're losing projects today to other states. For Hunt Midwest and having that much investment in the ground and above the ground, we need to have this power. We're in support of 1247 and hope that it passes.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Rich. Anybody else in opposition? Anybody else in support? Anybody for information purposes? Senator Black, do you have any quick closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 1247. Next up and last will be Senate Bill 789. And Senator Razer, I apologize. That bill took longer than I anticipated. And my committee is dwindling, but at least the hearing will occur. And I appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing a member of the committee. It's good to see. We'll give them a little time, maybe.
Senator, you're emptying the room. I don't know what's going on.
I won't say the comment that just came to me.
Senator, I really mean this. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Senator Greg Razer from the 7th District here to introduce Senate Bill 789. This bill has been described as in direct response to the proposal in the Memorandum of Understanding of the University of Kansas Hospital System taking over the Liberty, Missouri Hospital, and that's correct. That's how this came to be a bill, and this issue came about. I want to start by disclosing that I am a patient of the KU Med Center of the University of Kansas Hospital. My primary care physician was with another hospital system and moved over to the University of Kansas, which is where I went, and you both were here in the building a few years ago when I had a medical incident, and it was the University of Kansas Health System that took care of me and got me back healthy, and I appreciate what they've done for me. They're a fine medical institution. But the University of Kansas Hospital System is not a private entity or a for-profit entity. It is founded by the state of Kansas, and it is run by a board made up of Kansans, appointed by the governor of Kansas for the benefit of the people of Kansas. The Liberty Hospital District is a legal political subdivision with taxing authority granted by the state of Missouri under RSMO 206. We don't know what agreement this memorandum of understanding or what we'll get out of it, because that's been kept secret. But we do know that the University of Kansas Health System will run or have significant influence on the decision-making of this Missouri public subdivision, being the hospital. If this were a nonprofit hospital or a for-profit hospital that happened to be located in another state, I don't think this would be an issue. But this is an institution established by the state for the state of Kansas. One of the concerns that I've heard is that the Liberty Hospital may go out of business if Kansas doesn't come in and save it. Well, we've also heard that they've had other offers. We know that there are other offers that are out there. One member of their 5-person board has said that they don't think he thinks they haven't taken enough time to look at those offers. So any argument that the hospital will go out of business does not seem to be relevant. Furthermore, our own Attorney General has said that this merger is illegal under Missouri law in a roundabout way. Strictly under Missouri law, this would be fine. But our law says that it has to be legal in the partnering state. So we have to look at Kansas law. Kansas law raises this to an interstate compact, according to the Attorney General, meaning that both legislatures of both states have to approve it. Now, in the state of Missouri, the only legislation we have is my bill to try to prevent this from happening. And in Kansas, the president pro tem of their Senate has come out publicly against this. I think rightfully, we would say if MU Health tried to open up a hospital in Olathe, Kansas, he said, you know, there's somewhat like 31 rural hospitals in Kansas that are in dire need of help, and he doesn't understand why they're coming to Missouri. And I appreciate that argument. I would make the same one if we were doing that in reverse. So this would not be legal under Kansas law, so therefore our political subdivision can't enter into this contract. At the end of the day, I think this is simple. The Liberty Hospital District is a taxing authority in the state of Missouri, authorized by us, and we cannot allow a board of Kansans, a board appointed by the governor of that state, to benefit that state, to have control of a political entity in our state. And it doesn't matter which state that is. Borders have a purpose of being there, and we need to remember that, and that's what this bill is all about.
Thank you, Senator. I've read the Attorney General's letter, and when I first read it, I thought, well, that puts this to bed, but apparently it doesn't. So where do we go from here with the Attorney General? If this bill doesn't pass, do they then step in?
I'm not sure, and I do want to say that we've been working to alter what we filed as this bill. It may look something different. We've given every copy to the Missouri Hospital Association for their feedback. So we will have edits to this. I don't know what happens legally. I'm not sure how politically, if you have the two legislatures both filing bills to prevent it, the Attorney General from one of the two states saying that it's illegal, I don't know politically how you move forward at that point.
Okay.
But legally, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from us three? Senator Bernstein.
So you have this bill, and then you said the Speaker of the House in Kansas is against it?
It's the, from what I've heard, it's the President Pro Tem of
The
their
President
Senate.
Pro Tem?
Yes.
Okay. So do they have a bill that is against
they
it?
do. It's, and I looked at it
Okay.
yesterday, and I can't remember. It's not similar. It's not exactly like mine, but
Okay,
essentially saying you have to have our approval to do something like this.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. How many people want to speak in favor of this bill? How many want to speak opposed? Let's start with the opposition. First in opposition, please come forward. Senator, I think you're alone.
Am I alone? Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman and committee members. I'm Dr. Raghu Odiga. I'm the President and CEO of Liberty Hospital. Appreciate this opportunity. I'll take a few minutes, and I do have Chairman of our board who wants to speak as well. And there was a physician who was going to speak for thousands of patients in the community after the meeting was canceled a couple of times. He was unable to cancel his clinic today, and he has submitted his testimony in writing, and I'd like to submit that as well. I'll take a few minutes to answer some of the points raised by respectable senator here. First of all, why behind why we needed to look for a partner. And I know the senator said the quality of the care that he got and the quality of the care that people would get in our community and the taxpayers who would get, and staying our hospital open is not relevant. I beg to differ. I do believe it's very relevant. And in addition to independent hospitals like ours who are facing significant financial challenges, we've had additional cyber event recently that has pushed us to the edge. And it is all the more important that the ongoing business negotiations and the benefit to the taxpayers are not negated by this kind of interference. In terms of the comment about borders have purpose, we're talking about state borders here. We're not talking about borders between countries and the need to fight about the issues between Kansas and Missouri. To date, nearly 30% of the patients treated at the University of Kansas Health Center come from Missouri. There are about 40 to 50 patients from our primary service area who are in the hospital at KU Medical Center any given day, and they go there by choice. Diseases don't care about the border. And our idea is to provide that kind of care to the Missourians, our taxpayers, our constituents right there in the community. And in terms of the oppositions and talking about the legality of the entire thing, I'm a physician, I'm an administrator, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm going to request somebody who has the best knowledge of that to be able to speak here. And when we started this process, this is a long process. We started about a year ago, and we went through 32 different entities looking for the best partner, whittled it down to 12, whittled it down to 4, and that included the academic institution of this state. And there was no interest. And the interest that we got and the results that we came to was a decision made by a large team that included 12 members from the administration. It included 7 different physician leaders and 5 out of 6 trustees. All of them voted for this choice. And in terms of the legality of the entire thing and Attorney General's opinion, I'll defer it to the experts, but we engaged the best legal minds right from the beginning about this being legal and following the laws of the Missouri. And we strongly believe still that we're following the laws of Missouri, and we intend to do so. and we'll keep the Attorney General's office in communication about that. But by trying to bring in any sort of hindrance to this is only going to put us back, and by delaying, and we're going to lose services, we're going to lose ability to keep everybody employed. We employ over 2,000 people, and this is very important to me. I've lived in the community for 20 years out of the 50 years, and this month is the 50th year anniversary of Liberty Hospital, and I'd like to see it succeed another 50. So I'll take questions.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? I'm sorry, our committee's kind of limited right now. You have a question? Senator Bernstein.
You mentioned that 30% of the patients in the Kansas hospital are from Missouri.
That's correct.
How many patients do you have from Kansas in Liberty Hospital? What's the percentage?
A very small percentage. I would say less than 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you leave a witness form there, by the way? Did you fill out a witness form?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Next person in opposition, please come forward.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. And I'm Dennis Carter. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees at Liberty Hospital. We are a 6-person board voted on just like you all are. We started this process, like Dr. Adiga said, over a year ago. We did this strictly out of necessitation to find a partner that we could afford to stay in business. Make no mistake, if this legislation would go through, we would probably end up getting bought by a for-profit hospital that would gut our system. And you can look on any medical deal, and I can name the companies that would buy us. They would take out all the non-profitable things that we do, such as birthing center. There's no money in birthing. If you or your family are driving up I-35, we are the most northern trauma center. So to have that, you have to afford neurosurgeons on call 24 hours a day. You or your family members would have to go past our hospital if we were a for-profit hospital, because a neurosurgeon would not be profitable. Our 6-person board has 3 medical people on it. We have 2 nurses and a physician that have served the community all their lives. I'm a lifelong Liberty person. I made this decision. I voted for this because what would happen if myself or one of my family members needed to go to the hospital 3 years from now? And I can tell you, KU was overwhelmingly the choice we made. We would lose probably approximately 40% of our physicians and nursing staff if we went for profit, because a lot of these physicians are on deferrals where they can defer or get their loans repaid if they go work for a nonprofit. We serve the Northwest community. We are a political subdivision. When we talk about state lines, there's many other health institutions such as ACA, Children's Mercy, St. Luke's, and the new St. Luke's BJC partnership that even goes from Illinois all the way to Kansas. So to just single out why it's a university or a Kansas organization, we started this process. The first thing we did was we hired the best legal minds. We've been informed of what we can do and what we can't do. We know that we can vote on this as a political subdivision. Our people say that we're in the right on this thing. We wouldn't have spent the money that we've spent to do this, but we need to do it. Economics are simple. We get paid probably about 4% increase every year from commercial payers. Other people are less 1%. Our labor and health care is going up 10%. our supplies are going up 10%. Those two things don't match up. We can partner with a larger organization. They have better buying power. They have more cliche with the for-profit, such as Blue Cross, those type of people. So no disrespect for him. If this would pass, we are going to have to severely cut things that we're doing at the hospital because we can't afford it. We're bleeding red right now, and we must do this. And like I said, if we go for profit, they're going to gut. We'll be a little bit more than a triage center, but we will not be what Liberty Hospital and the people that voted us into office want us to be.
So you're a political subdivision. Do you have taxing authority?
Yes.
What, through property taxes, or how do you?
It's through property tax. It makes up less than about 1% of our total budget. And with the deal that we've signed 9 disclosures, but we have been publicly released that they would not take any public dollars from.
Have you tried to increase your levy before you went for this route?
No, we have not.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Next person in opposition, please come forward. Tell us who you are and begin when you're ready.
I'm well. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Chuck Hatfield. I'm an attorney with the Stinson Law Firm. We've represented Liberty Hospital District with regard to this deal, and I just wanted to address a couple of legal points that may be relevant. First, the levy is capped under Chapter 206. It says in there it's 50 cents or $1, so they're at or near the maximum. I think they're at the maximum, and they can't really go above that. I believe the board has publicly said that they will eliminate the levy should this deal go through because they won't need to collect taxes anymore. I just want to make 2 points about the structure of the deal to make sure as you think about this that we're on the same page. First, this deal is very similar to other hospitals that, as the chairman said, need to get big. It's very similar to the BJC St. Luke's deal that you may be aware of. It's very similar to the MU Capital Region deal that was just announced not long ago. The new Liberty Hospital District trustees, those elected trustees, will still exist. They will still be a political subdivision of Missouri. They will have the authority to enforce the agreements that they have made with the KU health system. Those include agreements to require that services continue there, that they cannot cut the services, agreements about the employees, and that employees will continue to be employed, agreements about significant investments in the hundreds of millions of capital into the hospital. And that's a really big deal, that we're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars coming this way from Kansas into Missouri. And the Liberty Hospital elected trustees will have the right in the agreement that we're negotiating to enforce those commitments. So they're not going away. Those elected officials are still going to have the authority to enforce the agreement. Second, just wanted to mention the Attorney General. After the Attorney General's statement, we met with the Attorney General to talk through the issues they raised about the interstate compact. I don't want to speak for them, but I'm confident that the way this deal is structured and the way it will be structured will comply with Missouri law, and that we have satisfied them that we're in full compliance. Now, I'm paid by the hospital, so you don't necessarily have to believe me. The Kansas City Business Journal interviewed 2 outside experts right after that statement, both of whom said, and I've got copies of the article if anybody wants it, but both of whom said that the way the deal is structured would comply with both Missouri and Kansas law. So happy to take any questions anybody has on.
Well, you say KU is going to be sending hundreds of millions of dollars to Liberty. Why is KU doing that?
Well, I think because they are interested in operating a hospital. They know that there is a need for the services. They've done other hospital deals.
But they're hundreds of millions ahead if they don't.
Pardon?
They're hundreds of millions ahead if they don't. They don't spend that money. It's in their coffers to use to what they have. I mean, I assume eventually they'll make money off this deal. I mean, that's the intent, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that someday they're hoping to break even or make money, but they're willing to. It's this. So, as Dr. Adiga said, several people. We asked several different bidders. to come forward, including the MU Health System. Would you like to participate? There are others who operated to put money into the system as well. KU was the best bid that we could come up with. But there are many people out there who are willing to do the upgrades. There's going to be a return on investment. I mean, once you do these system upgrades, medical records are a huge issue. Once you do those upgrades, once you put in the new MRI machines, once you do additional capital, you're going to get returns on those investments. Liberty doesn't have the money to make those investments. They can't go out and make those equipment upgrades. So I assume that the folks that propose putting money in think they're going to get ROI on that.
Thank you. Questions? Senator McCray.
Thank you, Senator. So I appreciate that you mentioned, or that one of the previous witnesses mentioned the big deal that's just been approved between BJC, kind of in my neck of the woods in the St. Louis region, and St. Luke's from the other, not the St. Luke's, but like a Kansas City St. Luke's.
Right.
And that does impact Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas. So I'm trying to understand, and not in legal terms, but can you explain to me how this is different than that deal that was just approved?
Well, I can really only explain it in legal terms.
Okay, go ahead. I'll try to understand you.
Extremely similar.
Okay.
So at the risk of getting way in the weeds, the structure of this Liberty deal is that there is a not-for-profit corporation that currently runs New Liberty Hospital.
Okay.
That will continue to exist. The organization will continue to be a Missouri not-for-profit entity. The University of Kansas system will have members of that board. So I tell you that to say that's very similar to what BJC and St. Luke's are doing. It's sometimes called a member substitution transaction. St. Luke's will continue to have a not-for-profit entity, as I understand it, that is its own corporate entity. But now BJC will have members of that board or input into how that not-for-profit works. Now theirs is a little more complicated because you've got different layers of not-for-profits, but these are very similar. I'm trying to think of an example in St. Louis, but the Senator Razer will know that the Health Midwest HCA acquisition, which was a for-profit takeover, but that had to do with buying out not-for-profit entities. So these are different in that you're talking about not-for-profit organizations.
Thank you. I understood that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thanks, Chuck. Anybody else in opposition?
Dropping those right there.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Rob Monses on behalf of the Missouri Hospital Association. Hesitant to testify against Senator Razer's bill. We often agree on healthcare policy matters, but we have concerns. We've met with the senator. We appreciate the dialogue with him and his office. We have concerns about the bill as filed. It specifically disadvantages a certain type of hospital, these hospital districts. There are 9 of those types of districts in the state of Missouri, Liberty Hospital being one. As it's drafted, it broadly covers collaboration or partnerships with university-associated medical centers located outside of Missouri. That's a concern. The language is overly broad. It could affect things like echoes, which are commonly used in Missouri today. It would drastically slow the ability of a hospital district to use telehealth or other types of technology to get specialists located with these institutions to interact with patients in those types of hospitals, and it would disadvantage patients in certain hospitals by limiting their access to care. And I think that reflects, I think, the concern that was related by the member of the Liberty Hospital Board. We have been working with Senator Razer's staff, and we have seen a draft of the substitute that is better in some ways, but we continue to have concerns, and others may be worse in other ways. So we're interested in continuing our dialogue with Senator Razer. We do have just general opposition, though, to restrict the ability of hospitals in the future to interact with institutions outside of the state, whether it's University of Kansas, University of Iowa, whomever it might be, we have serious concerns about that, because that is, by all appearances, going to be more and more prevalent going forward into the future. It certainly is a very difficult time in healthcare today. Hospitals across Missouri are struggling in the current environment, and we hope that we can advance policies that will address those concerns and not things that would create issues as we feel like this would. With that, I'll finish.
Was healthcare ever problem-free?
It's never uncomplicated.
I mean, back 30 years ago, was it a walk in the park? Or because it seems bewilderingly complicated now. And it had to be, funding before ACA had to be difficult.
Lots of complexity in the healthcare space, Senator.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thank you, Rob. Anybody else in opposition? Anybody for information purposes? Yeah. Thank God that's over.
Good afternoon, Senators. I'm David Klarich. I'm today appearing on behalf of former State Representative Myron Neff. He's a current member of the Board of Trustees of Liberty Hospital, and he asked me just to share a few comments, if you'll indulge me, please, for about a moment. Thank you, Senator Razer, for this opportunity. I regret that I'm unable to attend the hearing regarding Senate Bill 789. As a former Missouri State Representative, I understand the importance of committee hearings to help understand pending legislation. As an elected trustee of Liberty Hospital, I'm intimately knowledgeable of the pending transaction with the University of Kansas Health System. I've included the testimony in my initial public statement regarding my opposition to the transaction after the other trustees voted to move forward. My main opposition to the deal originally had to do with the lack of proper financial due diligence and how any translation would affect the hospital and the district now and in the future. To quote from my initial statement after the vote to proceed with the University of Kansas Health System, instead of asking tough questions and amply vetting the financial details of the various proposals, the board allowed groups and individuals with narrow interests to sway their opinions without considering the full financial implications to the taxpayers and the community. As a former and current Missouri elected official, I adamantly have had reservations about the citizens of Kansas taking control of a Missouri public subdivision with no guarantees of any financial benefits to the taxpayers that voted for it initially and that have supported it for the last 50 years. In addition, this type of partnership was certain to be complex, and proper due diligence was warranted to ensure that the passing muster with the law under which we are governed, and now with the Attorney General's opinion that came out last week, we know that this due diligence was lacking. My goal as a trustee is to ensure that effective health care is provided to our community, which KU Health and other entities that were interested in partnering with Liberty Hospital could provide. However, an additional goal is to ensure that any monies derived from such an investment stay primarily in the state of Missouri for the benefit of the citizens of the hospital district. This criteria has not been met to my satisfaction thus far, and I've encouraged my fellow board members to insist on such. He wants to thank you, Senator Cierpiot, and the senators on this committee for hearing this bill, because he believes it raises awareness to the health care needs of the community and the importance of ensuring that the citizens and taxpayers are properly represented. That presentation was once again prepared by Myron Neff, former state rep and current board member of Liberty Hospital.
And it's for information purposes. It kind of sounded,
information
might have leaned one way. But thank you very much. Any questions for this witness? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Anybody else for information purposes? Senator Rader, Greg, do you have any further comments?
If I may, Senator, just a few things that I noticed as we went through. We heard a lot about how many doctors and physicians are on the board or on the committees looking at this, and I understand from their perspective I would want to be affiliated with the University of Kansas and the University of Missouri health systems as well. It would be natural to want that. I would also ask, 10 years from now, when the Liberty Hospital District needs a new building, a new whatever it is they need, that's going to cost $30 million, and they come and they want $5 million from the state. Which state are they going to? Are they coming to us and asking for $5 million to invest in the University of Kansas health system? Or are they going to Topeka to ask for $5 million to invest in the people of Missouri? I think they get a no from both capitals. We know that the 6-member board has stated that they've seriously considered other offers. The levy is apparently capped. I think we could authorize that increase had they come to us for that. And then we have an agreement that, taking them at their word, that employees will stay, services stay, and the trustees are there to enforce it. The University of Kansas health system is very wealthy, very well funded, and I'm sure has a political entity that could change the membership of that board if need be. And then to Senator McCrary's question, what's different about this than the BJC St. Luke's takeover? BJC is a private hospital. St. Luke's is a private hospital. Both hospitals operate in multiple states, but neither is a political, legal
Senator, that will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 789. The hearing is adjourned. Sorry, we haven't had a meeting in